Marcus Kane adjusted his plasma rifle for the dozenth time, trying to look like he wasn't mentally composing love letters to the woman he was supposed to be protecting. The ceremonial hall buzzed with the low hum of anti-gravity platforms carrying dignitaries from 17 different star systems, each one more ridiculous than the last. Ambassador Quelix from the Rigel colonies kept his tentacles properly moistened in a portable humidity chamber, while the crystalline delegates from Andromeda Prime clicked and chimed every time someone walked too close to their resonance fields. "Stop fidgeting, Kane," whispered Sergeant Torres through his neural comm. "You look like you're about to propose to someone." If only you knew, Marcus thought, carefully not responding over the comm channel. 3 years of standing at attention, while Princess Lyrale moved through her royal duties like liquid starlight, and Torres still thought his nervousness came from the job. The princess glided across the polished quantum crystal floor, her elongated ears catching the prismatic light streaming through the cathedral dome. Those ears were the only thing that marked her as Etherian rather than human. Well, those, and the fact that she could probably hear his heartbeat from 50 meters away. Marcus had learned that particular tidbit the hard way during his first week, when she turned around mid-conversation with the High Chancellor to ask if he needed medical attention. "Breathe, Marcus," she'd said then, those silver eyes twinkling with barely contained laughter. "I promise the ceremony is less dangerous than it looks." Now, watching her accept the ceremonial crown of leadership from the floating holographic archive of her ancestors, Marcus felt that same breathless panic. After today, she'd be crowned leader of the Etherian Confederation. After today, protocol would probably reassign him to guard someone significantly less likely to make him forget his own name. The High Chancellor Vexter raised his staff, causing the assembled crowd to fall silent. Even the Andromedan crystals stopped their musical chattering. "Citizens of the galaxy," his voice boomed through the neural translation matrix, "we gather to witness the ascension of Princess Lyrale to the throne of her forefathers." Marcus tried to focus on scanning for threats, but his eyes kept drifting to the way the ceremonial light made her skin seem to glow. 3 years of watching her negotiate peace treaties with the patience of a saint, comfort grieving families with genuine compassion, and somehow maintain her sense of humor while dealing with politicians who could bore a black hole to death. The floating crystal formations began their ancient dance, each one projecting memories of previous rulers. Marcus had seen this ceremony in training vids, but experiencing it live was like watching the entire history of the galaxy unfold in slow motion. Unfortunately, history was also incredibly long and somewhat repetitive. "Do you think she practices that serene expression in the mirror?" Torres whispered through the comm. Marcus nearly snorted out loud. He could actually picture it, Lyrale standing in front of her royal mirror, trying out different levels of regal dignity. "No, Torres, I think she's naturally perfect at everything." "Oh, you've got it bad." The ceremony continued with the traditional recitation of achievements, which in Lyrale's case included preventing 3 wars, establishing the first interspecies university, and somehow convincing the notoriously violent Kresh Empire to take up competitive flower arranging instead of their usual hobby of planetary conquest. As the crown lowered toward her head, Marcus felt a strange tightness in his chest. This was it. The moment when Princess Lyrale became Queen Lyrale, ruler of half the known galaxy, and he became just another face in her security detail. "I wish I had the chance to marry her," he whispered, so quietly he barely heard himself. The crown stopped descending. Every head in the ceremonial hall turned toward him, including several that belonged to species he didn't even recognize. The Andromedan crystals let out a harmonious gasp that sounded like a cosmic wind chime in a hurricane. Princess Lyrale turned slowly, those silver eyes finding his across the crowded hall with laser precision. A smile played at the corners of her mouth, not her diplomatic smile, but something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. "Yes," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent hall without amplification. High Chancellor Vexter made a sound like a deflating balloon. Ambassador Quellex's tentacles went rigid with shock. Somewhere in the crowd, someone dropped what sounded like a very expensive piece of ceremonial equipment. Marcus felt his knees forget how to support his weight. The silence lasted exactly 37 seconds, Marcus knew, because his neural implant helpfully displayed a countdown timer, apparently thinking this was an appropriate moment for precise measurements. Then all hell broke loose. High Chancellor Vexter's ceremonial wine goblet shattered against the quantum crystal floor as his grip failed completely. The Andromedan delegates began chiming in what Marcus's translator identified as either congratulations or universal apocalypse. The semantic difference was apparently too subtle for the software. Did she just? Ambassador Quellex's tentacles writhed in confusion, spraying humidity mist in all directions. I believe she did, confirmed the elderly Counselor Thexmer, right before he toppled backward off his anti-gravity platform in a dead faint. Marcus stood frozen, his plasma rifle suddenly feeling like it weighed approximately 17 tons. This had to be a dream, or a hallucination, or maybe he'd been exposed to some kind of mind-altering space fungus. Princess Lyreley stepped down from the ceremonial dais, the half-placed crown floating forgotten above her head like a very expensive hat that couldn't make up its mind. She moved through the crowd of stunned dignitaries with the same grace she'd always possessed, except now she was walking directly toward him. "Your Highness," Marcus managed to croak, "I think there's been some kind of translation error." "Marcus," she said softly, stopping just close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her silver eyes. "In 3 years of service, have you ever known my hearing to be faulty?" "Well, no, but have you ever known me to speak without careful consideration?" "No, Your Highness, but I really think." "Then perhaps you should stop thinking and start listening." Her smile was radiant and slightly terrifying. "I said yes." Behind them, Counselor Yixendra was frantically consulting what appeared to be a holographic legal database the size of a small building. "This is unprecedented, catastrophic. The end of civilization as we know it." "Oh, please," Lyreley called over her shoulder without breaking eye contact with Marcus. "You said the same thing when I suggested allowing humans in the royal archives." "That was different. Books are one thing, but marriage is perfectly legal under Article 847b of the ancient marriage codes," Lyreley finished smoothly. "I've checked." Marcus blinked. "You've checked?" "Marcus, did you honestly think I spent 3 years listening to your heartbeat spike every time I entered a room without noticing why?" Tor's voice crackled through the neural comm. "Oh, this is rich. Kane, she's been playing the long game." "Not now, Tors," Marcus muttered. "Actually," Lyreley said with obvious amusement, "you might want to tell Sergeant Tors that Etherian hearing works on multiple frequencies, including neural communication channels." Tors went silent so fast Marcus could practically hear the mental record scratch. High Chancellor Vexter had recovered enough to approach, though he still looked like someone had explained quantum mechanics to him using interpretive dance. "Your Highness, surely you realize the political implications." "Oh, I'm counting on them," Lyreley said cheerfully. "Nothing gets the galaxy's attention quite like a good scandal. But the trade agreements, the diplomatic relations. 3 civilizations have already threatened to withdraw support if humans gain equal status. Then we'll find new civilizations to trade with. I hear the Zephyrians make excellent partners, and they've been asking for representation for decades." Marcus felt like he was watching a tennis match played with interstellar politics instead of balls. "Your Highness, maybe we should." "Call me Lyreley," she said. "We're engaged now." The word engaged hit the assembled crowd like a photon torpedo. Someone, Marcus thought it might have been the delegate from Proxima Beta, let out a wail that sounded like a dying hyperdrive engine. "This is madness." Counselor Thexmer had apparently recovered from his fainting spell, though he still looked green around the gills. A human cannot marry into the royal line. Why not? Lyreley asked with dangerous sweetness. Is there something inherently inferior about humans that I should know about? The counselor opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish trying to breathe in vacuum. Well, no, but tradition. Tradition, Lyreley repeated thoughtfully. Like the tradition of arranged marriages to strengthen political alliances, the one I've been avoiding for the past 5 years. Marcus was beginning to suspect that Princess Lyreley had been planning this moment far longer than the last 3 minutes. How long have you been thinking about this? Since approximately 15 minutes after you knocked me out of the way of that assassin's plasma blast, and then spent 10 minutes apologizing for touching royalty without permission. That was just my job. Marcus, she said patiently, you realize that most bodyguards don't compose poetry about their charge's eyes, right? Marcus felt his face turn approximately the same color as a red giant star. You heard that too. Enhanced hearing, remember. Also, for future reference, silver starlight dancing in cosmic pools of wonder was actually quite lovely, even if your rhyme scheme needs work. Tor's voice came through the calm as a barely suppressed laugh. Oh, Cain, you magnificent doomed bastard. I can still hear that, Lyreley mentioned conversationally. The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the quantum particles in the ceremonial crystals humming their ancient songs. The news spread across the galaxy faster than a supernova, carried by quantum communication networks that apparently had nothing better to do than gossip about royal engagements. Within 6 hours, Marcus found himself trending on 17 different social media platforms, including one that consisted entirely of sentient gas clouds who communicated through interpretive aurora displays. Congratulations, Tors said, dropping a data pad onto Marcus's breakfast tray. You're now the most famous human in known space. Also, the betting pools on Rigel Station have you dead within a week. Marcus poked at what his food synthesizer claimed was bacon, but looked suspiciously like recycled boot leather. What are the odds? 17-1 against survival. Although the smart money seems to be on death by etiquette violation rather than assassination. That's actually not unreasonable. Master Zenkorath materialized in the doorway with the silent grace of someone who'd spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of appearing ominous. The elderly Etherian's elongated ears twitched with what Marcus had learned to recognize as barely contained despair. Marcus Cain, Zenkorath intoned, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic disappointment. Your royal husband preparation begins now. My what now? You cannot simply marry Princess Lyreley without proper training. Do you have any idea how many ways a human can accidentally declare war during a state dinner? Marcus considered this more than 0. 47 documented cases in the past century alone. Ambassador Kelwick of Earth Colony 7 once started 3 separate conflicts by using the wrong fork for his appetizer. Tors whistled through his teeth. Remind me never to accept dinner invitations from diplomats. Zenkorath led Marcus through corridors he'd never seen before, past rooms filled with floating holographic displays showing complex diplomatic scenarios. In one, a human figure repeatedly bowed to an alien delegate, each bow apparently conveying a different level of either respect or mortal insult. Your first lesson, Zenkorath announced, stopping before a table set with what appeared to be approximately 300 different eating utensils, is dinner etiquette. Can you identify the proper implement for consuming Andromedan crystal fruit? Marcus stared at the bewildering array of cutlery. One piece looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen hands before. Another appeared to be actively humming, the shiny one. That is a ceremonial war pick, used specifically for declaring blood feuds with the Kresh Empire. Right, the other shiny one. Marcus, Zenkorath said with infinite patience, perhaps we should start with something simpler. Can you tell me the difference between a greeting bow and a mating ritual? There's a difference. Zenkorath closed his eyes and made a sound like wind passing through a tomb. This is going to be a very long training period. Meanwhile, across the palace, Lyrale was dealing with her own challenges. The royal council had apparently spent the night compiling alternatives to her marriage, each more ridiculous than the last. "We could clone him," suggested Counselor Yixandra hopefully. "Create an Etherian version with properly elongated ears and enhanced hearing. All the benefits of Marcus Kane, but with improved genetics." "No," Lyrale said firmly, "I'm not marrying a copy. I want the original, complete with his tendency to walk into transparent doors and his habit of talking to himself when he thinks no one's listening." "But Your Highness," High Chancellor Vexter pleaded, 3 star systems have already filed formal complaints. The Proximan Trade Federation is threatening to cancel the dilithium mining contracts. The Centauri Republic has recalled their ambassador. Then we'll find new trading partners. I hear the Zephyrians make excellent conversation, and their technology is centuries ahead of the Proximans anyway. The Council of Elders is demanding an explanation. Tell them I'm following my heart. If they need a more political answer, tell them I'm modernizing our diplomatic relationships through strategic interspecies bonding. Back in the training rooms, Marcus was discovering exactly how many ways he could accidentally offend an entire civilization. "No, no, no," Zenkorath moaned as Marcus attempted what he thought was a respectful bow. "You just offered to sell your firstborn to the Rigelian Collective in exchange for mining rights to their home planet." "I thought I was saying hello." "Hello" is a slight inclination of the head. What you did was a full ceremonial prostration with commercial implications. Tors, who had been granted permission to observe the training for reasons Marcus suspected involved entertainment value, was barely containing his laughter. "Can you teach him the one that accidentally starts wars? I want to know what to avoid at the wedding." "There will not be a wedding," Zenkorath said grimly, "if Marcus cannot learn the basic difference between pleased to meet you and I challenge your entire species to single combat. Those are different things. Extremely different." The afternoon brought lessons in galactic history, during which Marcus learned that humans had a disturbing tendency to accidentally become legends. The Great Human Incident of 2387, where a lost tourist had somehow been elected emperor of the Tau Ceti system, was apparently still causing diplomatic headaches. "The key," Zenkorath explained, "is to appear confident without seeming threatening, humble without appearing weak, and intelligent without being condescending. So basically, the opposite of everything I naturally do." "Precisely." That evening, Lyrale found Marcus in the training room, slumped over a holographic display of proper hand gestures for 17 different species. "How's the preparation going?" she asked, settling beside him. "Well, I can now successfully greet an Andromedan without accidentally proposing marriage to their entire crystal matrix, so there's progress." Lyrale laughed, the sound like silver bells in a solar wind. "Marcus, you do realize that half the galaxy is betting against our marriage succeeding." "Only half. I'm disappointed. I expected better odds." "The other half," she continued with a mischievous smile, "is betting on whether you'll survive the bachelor party." Marcus's first official diplomatic dinner as Lyrale's fiancée was going surprisingly well, right up until he accidentally prevented his own assassination with a bowl of soup. It started innocently enough. The Zephyrian ambassador had just finished explaining their species' unique approach to interstellar commerce. Apparently they traded in crystallized emotions, which explained why the dinner conversation felt unusually intense. When Marcus reached for what he thought was the proper spoon for the glowing blue appetizer. "Not that one," Lyrale murmured, her enhanced hearing picking up the soft mechanical whir that Marcus's human ears had missed. "That's..." The disguised assassin's plasma blade ignited exactly where Marcus's chest would have been. If he hadn't chosen that precise moment to lean forward and promptly dump an entire bowl of Rigelian consciousness soup all over the would-be killer. The soup, which was supposed to enhance telepathic abilities in species that possessed them, had the unfortunate side effect of broadcasting the assassin's thoughts to everyone in the room with any psychic sensitivity whatsoever. "Oh, blast," the assassin muttered, his mental voice now audible to half the dinner party. The plan was to make it look like food poisoning, not performance art. Ambassador Quellix's tentacles began writhing in what Marcus had learned to recognize as Rigelian laughter. Did he just think about disguising a plasma blade as a dinner utensil? That's actually rather clever. "Focus," Lyreley commanded, though Marcus caught the hint of amusement in her voice. "We have bigger problems." She was right. The soup had also revealed that their would-be assassin wasn't working alone. His panicked thoughts were painting a very clear picture of a much larger conspiracy. The Purity Coalition will not be stopped by one failed attempt, his mind broadcast helplessly. Phase 2 involves the wedding ceremony itself, and Phase 3, oh no, why am I thinking about Phase 3? Because you're covered in telepathic soup, Marcus pointed out reasonably, still holding the empty bowl. Also, what's Phase 3? The systematic elimination of human leadership across 17 star systems. The assassin's thoughts supplied against his will. Starting with the destruction of Earth's primary orbital stations and working our way up to, "Stop thinking about the plan, you idiot." The dinner party erupted into chaos, but it was the organized kind of chaos that comes from people who are used to dealing with galactic conspiracies over the appetizer course. "Security Alert Level 7, Lyreley commanded, her royal training kicking in seamlessly. "Full communication blackout on all channels until we can determine the scope of infiltration." Marcus found himself swept along as the princess, who apparently had been expecting something like this, initiated what could only be described as a controlled evacuation that looked suspiciously like a military operation. "You knew," he realized as they moved through corridors he'd never seen before. "You knew they were coming." "Marcus," Lyreley said, her voice carrying a note he'd never heard before, something sharp and dangerous and entirely royal. "Did you really think I'd agree to marry you without considering the political ramifications? I honestly hadn't thought that far ahead. I know, it's one of the things I love about you. But while you were learning dinner etiquette, I was learning exactly who wants to stop this marriage and why." They emerged into what Marcus could only describe as a war room, complete with holographic displays showing ship movements across 3 star systems and communication intercepts that made his security clearance seem adorably quaint. "The Purity Coalition," Lyreley explained, her fingers dancing across control panels with practiced ease, "believes that humans represent a corruption of galactic civilization. They've been quietly building support for the better part of a decade. And our engagement was the final straw. A human marrying into Etherian royalty means humans gain equal status under interspecies law. It means your people can no longer be treated as a servant class." Marcus stared at the tactical displays showing coalition fleet movements. "So this isn't really about us." "Oh, it's absolutely about us," Lyreley corrected, pulling up intelligence reports that made Marcus's head spin. "Our personal happiness just happens to threaten their entire worldview. Rather inconvenient of us, really." "Your Highness," came Tor's voice over the secure communication channel, "we've got coalition agents attempting to infiltrate the palace maintenance systems. Also, someone's been asking pointed questions about the catering arrangements for the wedding." "Let me guess," Marcus said with growing dread. "They're not concerned about dietary restrictions." "More like explosive restrictions," Tors confirmed cheerfully. "The good news is that our new Zephyrian friends are offering military support. Turns out they really don't like the whole genetic purity concept." Lyreley smiled, and Marcus was reminded that she wasn't just a princess. She was the daughter of warriors who had united half the galaxy through a combination of diplomacy and strategic application of superior firepower. Excellent. Signal the Zephyrian fleet to maintain holding position at the system's edge. If the Coalition wants to make this about more than a simple wedding, we'll be happy to accommodate them. Ma'am, Marcus said slowly, are you planning to use our wedding as bait for a galactic conspiracy? Marcus, Lyreley replied with a smile that could have powered a small star. I'm planning to use our wedding to end a galactic conspiracy. There's a difference. And if they try to kill us during the ceremony, then we'll have the most memorable wedding in galactic history. Also, I've arranged for some rather impressive security measures. Marcus was beginning to suspect that marrying Princess Lyreley was going to be significantly more complicated than just learning proper fork etiquette. The wedding ceremony began exactly as planned, which should have been Marcus's first clue that something was about to go spectacularly wrong. I can't believe we're actually doing this, he muttered to Tors through the neural comm, adjusting his ceremonial armor for what felt like the 1000th time. Hey, look on the bright side, Tors replied cheerfully. If you die today, at least it'll be in front of representatives from 47 different star systems. Very dignified. That's not as comforting as you think it is. The great ceremonial hall had been transformed into something that looked like a cross between a diplomatic summit and a fortress. Zephyrian honor guards flanked the entrances, their crystallized emotion weapons glowing soft blue in standby mode. The Andromedan delegates had formed a protective harmonic barrier around the ceremony space, their combined resonance frequencies creating a shield that could apparently stop everything from plasma fire to existential despair. Nervous? Lyreley asked, appearing beside him with that unsettling grace that still made his heart skip beats. Terrified, Marcus admitted, but not of getting married, more of the part where we use our wedding to expose and defeat a galaxy-spanning conspiracy. That does add a certain pressure to the vows. High Chancellor Vexter approached, looking remarkably calm for someone officiating what might become the most violently interrupted ceremony in galactic history. Your Highnesses, we're receiving intelligence reports of Coalition fleet movements in 3 adjacent systems. They're maintaining distance, but they're waiting for something, Lyreley finished. Perfect, let them wait. The ceremony began with the traditional harmonic convergence, where representatives from each attending species contributed to a musical tapestry that was supposed to symbolize galactic unity. Marcus had been worried about this part, since humans were generally acknowledged to be the tone-deaf species of the galaxy, but Lyreley had assured him that effort mattered more than quality. He was halfway through what he hoped was the correct human contribution, a song his grandmother had taught him about stars and journeys, when the first wave of Coalition infiltrators struck. They came through the ventilation systems, because apparently even in the far future, villains still preferred dramatically impractical entrance methods. The first sign of trouble was when one of the Andromedan delegates hit a note so discordant that several guests covered their auditory receptors in pain. That's not part of the ceremony, Marcus observed, reaching for his plasma rifle. No, Lyreley agreed, producing what appeared to be a ceremonial staff that was definitely not ceremonial. That's our cue. What followed was the most unusual wedding in recorded galactic history. Marcus found himself exchanging vows while simultaneously providing covering fire for the Zephyrian honor guard. Lyreley managed to promise to love and cherish him for all their days, while coordinating a counterattack against Coalition forces, attempting to breach the main hall. "Do you, Marcus Kane," Vexter shouted over the sound of plasma fire, "take Princess Lyreley to be your wife, in prosperity and warfare, in peace and galactic revolution?" "I do," Marcus called back, ducking a stray energy blast that turned a decorative crystal formation into very expensive confetti. "And do you, Princess Lyreley?" The Chancellor continued with admirable dedication to protocol, Take Marcus Kane to be your husband, accepting his species into the royal lineage and granting humans equal status under interspecies law. But I absolutely do, Lyreley replied, then paused to disable a coalition saboteur with a move that Tors would later describe as poetry in motion, if poetry involved breaking people's wrists. But the real surprise came when the coalition's leader finally revealed himself, Commander Zexthal, formerly of the Etherian Royal Guard, who had apparently been planning this moment for years. "You cannot unite the species," he declared, his amplified voice carrying over the battle sounds. "The natural order must be preserved." "The natural order," Lyreley replied conversationally, not even looking up from the tactical display she was consulting, "includes evolution. You might want to try it sometime." Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering that 3 months of royal husband training had included more combat preparation than he'd realized. When Zexthal challenged him to single combat, apparently a thing that still happened in the far future, Marcus found himself responding with diplomatic protocols instead of panic. "I accept your challenge," he said formally, "but propose we settle this through civilized discourse rather than violence." "There is no discourse with inferior species." "Well," Marcus replied, dodging a plasma blade with surprising grace, "that attitude right there is probably why you're losing this war." The duel was brief but educational. Marcus had spent his entire adult life protecting others, while Zexthal had spent his planning the destruction of people he'd never met. The difference in motivation showed. "The coalition falls with me," Zexthal gasped as Marcus's stunner dropped him to the crystalline floor. "Actually," Lyreley said, appearing with a data pad full of intelligence reports, "the coalition fell about 20 minutes ago. Your fleet commanders surrendered when they realized they were surrounded by the combined forces of 7 different species, who all think genetic purity is a stupid concept." The ceremony concluded with Marcus and Lyreley exchanging rings, while coalition prisoners were processed in the background. The Andromedan delegates provided a victory song that sounded like wind chimes celebrating in a solar storm. "You may kiss the bride," Vexthal announced with considerable relief. Marcus did, and discovered that kissing someone while representatives from 47 different star systems cheered in 47 different ways was actually quite pleasant, once you got past the cacophony. "So," he said afterward, still holding Lyreley close while the galaxy's media networks went wild with the story, "what do we do for our next adventure?" "Well," Lyreley replied thoughtfully, "the Zephyrians have offered us a honeymoon planet, the Andromedans want to compose a symphony about our wedding battle, and 3 different species have asked if we'd be interested in mediating their territorial disputes. And I was thinking we could start with something simple, like figuring out how to be married." Marcus looked around at the celebration, at Tors grinning like an idiot while trying to dance with a crystalline delegate,